episode 19 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slowinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and or making games. Show notes, nothing.
Not a lot, really.
No, we're busy doing stuff.
Things are happening.
If you'd like to support us, please pick up one of our titles, available on wherever.
Too many places, if anything.
Wherever games are sold. Mike, what are you playing? What are we playing?
Oh, Infamous 2.
No. No.
What else are we playing?
That we're not playing Infamous 2.
That's not the right game.
No, it's not.
No, that's a game from previously. Injustice 2.
There we go.
We've been playing Injustice 2. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. What's our favorite matchup, Mike?
That would be Green Arrow versus Green Lantern, the two cheapest characters in the game.
Such ridiculous characters. So just to give you a sense here, I play as Green Lantern, and Mike plays as Green Arrow, where Mike will consistently go to the other side of the screen and just keep shooting arrows, as I desperately keep trying to jump over his arrows or dodge under his arrows, and then grab him with my Green Lantern, like...
Someone is already typing into the comments, like, the 10 tactics you should use against that incredibly childish approach.
And I am happy. Thank you, dear listener, who is currently writing in the YouTube comments or sending us a piece of mail at contact@bithellgames.com.
Good job.
Right now, telling us or telling me how my Green Lantern can just get up in his. Because
once we get close, you've got the whole kind of using the ring to kind of slam me back and forth thing, which I have one counter to, and I usually get it in within 3 goes. Then move to the other side of the screen and start shooting you again. It's a great game. But what you've not experienced is the single player, which is the thing that I think a lot of people are getting hyped about, which is good. You should play.
No, I have.
Oh, you have played this single player now?
Yeah. I've also been doing the multiverse.
The multiverse is neat. So the multiverse, for those who don't know, is it's, I guess...
Actually, let's roll this completely back right now. For those who don't know, Injustice 2 is the sequel to Injustice 1. It is
the 14th Mortal Kombat game, 15th Mortal Kombat game, something like that.
Yeah, it's a fighting game by the folks that do Mortal Kombat. So you've probably noticed over the last several years, it goes after Warner Brothers acquired the rights to Mortal Kombat. And that studio, it became Mortal Kombat, Injustice, Mortal Kombat X, Injustice 2, and we're probably going to see that bouncing back and forth with Mortal Kombat being, I guess the more legacy product with, hyper violence and everything like that, and Injustice being in the DC Comics universe, having Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all of that stuff. Black Canary shout out, amazing character. And doing that, and Injustice 2, if Injustice, like, it's your classic sequel situation where, like, if Injustice 1 was, like, really expensive proof of concept, Injustice 2, like, brings this thing home. Like, it is a good game.
Yeah, it's super solid, and I think just production value is through the roof on it.
I just, oh my god, how many animators? Like, Mike, genuinely, like, I want to see the animation budget.
I think I tweeted that, like, when I played it, like, it's genuinely, it's mind-boggling, because there is at least 2 or 3 hours of cutscenes. Like, at least that. I played it last weekend for about, I guess maybe it took me about 7 hours to get through. There's a couple of tricky fights, but, like, I swear half of that time I was just watching, like, a really good Justice League movie. But yeah, it's great. It's all those cutscenes are pre-rendered, so they can push the visuals even further, which is nice. The combat's good. The multiverse. So with the single player campaign, if you've not played NetherRealm's single player campaign before, it's basically just cutscene, fight. They tend to leave you as the same character maybe for 2 or 3 fights. In some cases, they let you choose between 2 characters at once. Very simple structure. But just
it's definitely their formula at this point.
Yeah, it is a formula, and it works. I mean, and it's compelling. It's just enough story to set you up and to explain things. I would say, actually, if anything, some of the cutscenes are maybe a little overlong. Like, sometimes it felt like I was playing a bit of a Metal Gear Solid game at some points where it was like, no, I'm ready to punch something now. Like, let's find an opportunity for that. But very good, great voice casting. Really cool to hear. Oh God, what's his name? The guy playing Brainiac in it is the guy who was every secondary character in Deep Space Nine. What's his name?
Gul Dukat?
No, he was everyone except Gul Dukat. He's the guy who played the Orta dude. Oh, what was the Orta dude? Is it Orta, the Dominion's PR people?
Oh, I think I gave up by that point on Deep Space Nine.
You gave up on Deep Space Nine before season 6?
Yeah.
Crikey. That's like throwing in the towel on Star Wars half an hour into New Hope. But yeah, no, anyway, but great voice cast. The only voice actor in it that I didn't think was absolutely incredible was the person doing the Mark Hamill impression as the Joker. That was the only voice that doesn't quite sound perfect to me. It's still very good in a lesser quality game. I think it would have brought it down. It would have been one of the better performances, but in this game, just every voice performance was great. Nailing the characters. You're making a face. Do you disagree on that?
I'm imagining you voice directing this game and turning to the guy who's playing Joker and being like, "Can you be a little bit more Mark Hamill? Can you?"
I would actually, honestly,
it up a bit.
You know what? I want him to be less Mark Hamill. I think that invites a comparison. You know, when you're, in my opinion, imitating one of the best voiceover character performers there is, you're already setting yourself up to failure. I kind of would have liked a more original take. I think that would probably serve the actor better. I bet the actor was asked to do a Mark Hamill impression, and I think that honestly probably frustrated the actor as much as it frustrated me. Which is true. It's always first rule of voice acting. It's always the director's fault. It's never the actor's fault. The actor is not responsible for their performance. The director is. Anyway, so that was very good, and the multiverse thing's neat as well, right? So the multiverse thing is basically a championship mode in the game. It's essentially a championship mode generator, but what they do is they wrap it in the narrative stuff of you're traveling to alternate dimensions in order to solve problems. And it's just a masterstroke. It's a very, very clever way of taking championship fighting. You have to fight these 4 enemies in sequence and turning it into actually something that feels right for a superhero movie game. It's great.
It's software as a service perfected for a single player campaign. Like,
yeah, it works. And the loot drops are great. It's it's proper Overwatch. A lot of it is ripped straight out of Overwatch. Or am I wrong? Maybe Overwatch ripped off Mortal Kombat, or is it very much Overwatch? It feels. They're genetically linked. I just don't know who stole from who. Yeah,
I mean, at this point, everyone's like offered their blood to this vat and just had it mixed together, and everyone's like taking a hit from that. But no, the multiverse stuff is, it's you paid $60 for this game or 50 quid, whatever it is, and you got through that single player, and boy, you got your value out of your cutscenes on that. And then, but you're going to play the multiplayer against your friends, and I'm looking forward to that. But maybe, multiplayer online, I'm just not good enough for that. What else could I possibly do? Oh, here's the metaverse.
Yeah,
and that is the perfect sort of answer to the folks like me who will either play with their friends or want some kind of like extension of the single player campaign that isn't necessarily the single player campaign. And
great place to practice the characters as well, right? To play, if you're going around your friend's house on Tuesday and you want to make sure you're absolutely brilliant at this character beforehand, you can.
And each of the characters level up, and each of the characters have clothing. We haven't even talked about any of that. Like all the like the amount of clothing and assets that were created for each one of these characters is bananas.
You know what I really like about the clothing and customization? They have done a brilliant job of making the lowest value stuff the most expensive to produce. So the low value stuff is, in terms of low value to a player, like a perceived, like obviously lots of them have stat boosts, but what's the thing that gives you the most value when you get it? What's the coolest thing you get as a drop in the game?
Clothing.
So we differ. For me, it's the color palette swaps, and the color palette swaps are the cheapest thing for them to make, but the coolest thing to me, at least. They feel like the most massive changes to my characters. Whereas all the clothing stuff for me is less cool as a player, but obviously much more expensive to produce. But that's different for you, so maybe I'm probably generalizing too much there.
But I mean, there's outfits, Mike. Like I can get them all dressed in really cool outfits, and the outfits cool. match, and then I get stat bonuses because they're matching outfits.
Do you get the? I was going to ask about that because I haven't got a full set yet. You get a little boost? Do you?
Yeah, there's stat bonuses for matching outfits.
That's clever. So I think it's really neat, and as someone who isn't into doesn't know the canon of something like Mortal Kombat, to go in and know who Superman is and know who Brainiac is and have a bit of cultural awareness of my own, it felt like a game for me, and it just makes me I know Marvel vs. Capcom's coming out, but I kind of just want the Marvel version.
But see, even when you talk about that, one of the things we really have to stop here for a moment and discuss, because again, it's the thing I compliment you about fairly often: control, feeling. You can pull off really great moves with I don't have to go out and buy a $120 fight stick to make this game work for me, which is what I very much have to do with a Street Fighter game.
So I would say the controls are great. Where it falls down for me is that classic Mortal Kombat animation problem, that then the animation doesn't feel either impactful enough or responsive enough. Like, the animation to me is where the game feel falls down. But I agree with you, like, you can pull off those, and that's honestly, that's as much to do with combo design as it is that I get the impression that a lot of the combos are designed around a thumbstick. The combos are designed to be, do your quarter circle and
and you know exactly what you're doing, because everyone knows how to do Hadouken, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And every character has a Hadouken, essentially. Yeah. So I think I think that's actually more of a it's more of a content solution than it is an interface solution. I think the interface in Injustice 2 isn't as good as another kind of fighting game. I think it does suffer from the Mortal Kombat kind of this doesn't feel responsive enough problem, but it feels like they've designed the combos, so the content of the gameplay, around that and done stuff much more simply, which leads to it, which is a solution. I still think there's some fundamental problems with the animation and feedback of those games, but it feels great because the content's been designed around those limitations, which is absolutely valid as a design approach.
I will still absolutely take I will take a Mortal Kombat or an Injustice over a Street Fighter, because I don't have to pay $120 extra for a stick. I'll pay $120 extra for content.
And that's the statement. That statement is going to be the reason we get 20 comments below the video on YouTube. Last week it was communism and broadband suppliers. This week, Alexander thinks Street Fighter sucks compared to Mortal Kombat. Have at it in the comments.
All right, and now it's time for what's going on at the studio. And what's going on at the studio is Mike and I were looking at a studio space. We were looking at a space, and the topic of this conversation is more about the immediate things we realized that we wanted and don't want from a space, or just kind of that stumbling through, like, what do we do in this situation? Although I do have to point out, my favorite thing is that we were offered glasses of water while we were looking at this place, and Mike took my glass of water afterwards and cleaned it out in the sink and made sure to put it back all clean and proper, like it was.
That's how you make. You've got to treat people with respect. I stand by that. You can laugh all you like, but that's
no. It was adorable.
That's how you have a good reputation in this industry, is by treating people with respect.
That Mike Bithell. He will drink your water and leave a dirty glass.
It'll never happen. You'll never hear that rumor. You'll hear many other horrible rumors about me, but no, I will never be accused of not doing the dishes.
So yeah, what was your sort of takeaway from things that we realized in our, from our personal perspective, like what we sort of want or need in an office space?
I think we might have talked about this on the podcast before, but the geography is obviously very important. I think that's something that we've talked about a lot in terms of making sure that everyone who works at the studio has somewhere they can live nearby, has a not too horrible commute. In London, that's a real concern, that you want to make sure that there are opportunities, because obviously in any company you have different pay scales. You have some people who paid not as much and some people who paid more, and making sure that everyone can find a home, that they can get to the office within 45 minutes at most. That's a logistical thing to make sure of before you jump in on a place, because you don't want angry juniors who've had to wake up in a horrible hostel like environment and then travel an hour and a half to get into the office. That's not going to fly. So that's good.
But doesn't that build character, Mike?
Yeah, trickle down economics and all that, right? Yeah, no, it doesn't. It just makes your team members hate you. And rightly so. So I think that's interesting. And then actually on the same kind of thing, something I always look for, and I don't know, maybe people think this is silly, but I always make sure there's lots of lunch places nearby, because those team members are also going to want to be able to not have to get the same bloody sandwich every day. So making sure there's a breadth of options for them to go out with colleagues, and likewise, stuff for them to do after work, bars, cinemas, restaurants, the kinds of things that make a nice life around the work, I guess. That's something that I pay a lot of attention to, because I've worked in offices in the middle of nowhere. I've worked in offices where there's loads of really cool stuff around, and it does factor into your quality of life, and therefore, ultimately from a capitalist perspective, how well you do your job.
Now, have you ever run into the not enough plugs problem in an office?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a game studio, are you kidding? The one that always trips people up is when you move to console dev, because you've got to have the dev kits and TVs. So you go from needing probably 2 plugs for a monitor and a PC to needing upwards of 4, maybe 5, 6. That's where, or the PlayStation VR, when you've got the external box and everything, and oh god, yeah.
Just to give a sense to folks out there who've never traveled internationally, the UK plugs are enormous. They are.
That's because we like to earth our electrical equipment like a bunch of idiots. We just really don't like killing ourselves with electronic equipment. It's a terrible, stupid country.
I am not making a judgment statement here. I'm merely pointing out that these plugs are enormous, and because they are enormous, I purchased a tower. I should probably take a photo of this. I purchased a tower, which would in the States just be this sort of octopus strip kind of thing, but because the plugs are so large, it is this 3-foot tower of plugs to just get stuff in there. So the not enough plugs. Definitely something to pay attention to, and then invest heavily in your plug tower to be able to get 4 or 5 things connected. The other thing we certainly noticed, and I think this is going to become a thing for us as we look at places, is a conference room.
Yeah, meeting room. We were surprised that not every office has that. And I think, if you're doing a very kind of flat kind of office working environment where everyone chats, then I think it makes sense. But I am definitely a believer in having somewhere private in an office that, when someone's having a tough day and needs to have a chat, and or in the situation where someone's doing a bad job and you need to kind of talk to them about how to improve and stuff. I think some privacy is important in an office space. I know in the years I've worked in the games industry, I've been very glad for a private office that a boss could take me into, because I wouldn't want to have certain conversations in front of everyone. And
it's not just that; it's business meetings as well. If mm-hmm. I'm talking about a contract, or if there's a hiccup with a milestone, I should not be having that conversation in front of the entire team.
No, it's not great for morale. I don't know, maybe you and I, maybe we're just a bit more hierarchical than a few other people, in terms of how we do things. But we're very transparent with the team. The team always knows how things are going and what's going on, but there are conversations that me and Alexander have to have that, frankly, we have to have in private, and I think that might just be the way we think. I don't know if it's necessarily wrong the other way. I think it's probably, it's definitely working for a lot of people, but for us, I think we're going to need an office.
No, it's an interesting
a meeting room, not an office. A meeting room we can go into, an open plan office, but with somewhere that when people need a bit of privacy, they can go and take it.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one, and really the sort of thing that we kind of stumbled over, which because when I started thinking about it, and I've never worked in an environment that didn't have a designated conference room or meeting room. So just to think of like the number of conversations that because I don't really have production conversations, right? Like, so to have those types of conversations in front of the entire team I don't know. I think it would be just bothersome to them. Like I'm not sure people want to hear that. And then, like you said, from a morale standpoint, like things can change, like, this industry, things can shift rapidly. So like, yeah, I might have a problem on a Tuesday that's going to get solved on a Thursday. But if I'm having that conversation in front of the team for 2 days, like, what must they think? Like, it probably sounds horrible. And like, no amount of like, nah, it's going to be fine. This is the way things are. This will get resolved by like week's end. But, if you're an artist or you're a programmer and you're hearing like some of these conversations going on, I don't know. Again, it could be a cultural thing. Like from my cultural perspective, it's just like, oh God, am I not going to have health insurance? Are we done? Like, should I start looking for another job? Like,
I mean, those rumors swirl in offices. I've definitely been in offices where there's been the rumor going around, like that we're in real trouble or whatever. But yeah, I feel like some private meetings are a way to solve that. What I love is the most tech industry solution to this is arising, where you have studios that don't have closed offices. That there's now a service in London. I don't think I'm going to embarrass them by mentioning this. I saw this in Bossa when I visited a friend there a couple of weeks ago. There are companies in London that now install for you this kind of hermetically sealed cube that you can insert into your open plan office, and is essentially a meeting room.
Really?
It's like people are now selling this option of installing a meeting room into your open plan office. So we've gone full circle that all of these kind of offices that are open plan, people are starting to realize, no, we do need some privacy for some meetings, and they're installing. It looks like almost like a sci-fi capsule. It's very cool. If anyone listening ever goes to Bossa, like, check it out, because it's neat. But it is, this kind of we've gone full circle on the process now, which is interesting.
All I can think of is that scene from The Newsroom now, where he's beating on the glass while they're having a fight in the conference room. He's like, "This isn't soundproof glass."
I wanna thank you for reading the freedom mail again. Thank you for reading the freedom mail again.
I took part in Mike's Twitter Q&A and asked the question about showing off your skill in a portfolio as a gameplay programmer. Mike replied with different things like, quote, weird character locomotion, quote, challenging interactions, and, quote, some AI. I was wondering if Mike could expand further on each of those elements on the podcast or through a reply of some sort. Smoke signals. For example, would character locomotion fall under an animation cycle made in... Oh, you're testing me now. Mechanim. What would he consider to be challenging interaction worthy of a portfolio? As for the AI stuff, I love working on the Unity tutorials, including the tanks, ! Project focused on basic AI systems. Would this be impressive to include on a portfolio, or is it better to leave this out and instead work on a personal project off the back of the knowledge gained by completing it, or both? My current portfolio looks like this. Link. Thanks for the advice, Connor C. So I guess we should start off with would character locomotion fall under animation cycles?
I'm actually, if it's okay with you, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to go to the tutorial questions. That feels like a low-hanging fruit.
Cool.
So the tutorial question, The problem with including tutorial work in your portfolio is it doesn't demonstrate problem solving or that you've done something original. It shows, frankly, that you've copied something, and that's what a tutorial is. It's a learning process. That said, tutorials can get out of hand. I think I've said a few times that Thomas Was Alone absolutely started as a tutorial project, and we just kept working into it and working into it and working into it. So if something is sufficiently different from the tutorial, that's great. But if you have a portfolio that includes a commonly known thing that's in a tutorial, expect the person looking at that to be aware of that and to kind of not see it as something that you've kind of originated yourself. That also actually goes for stock assets. So things like those tanks that you're talking about, I'm aware of those tanks. I've seen those tanks. I think even had a look at that tutorial myself. So if you include that tutorial in your portfolio, I'm not going to necessarily be as impressed as I would be by something original.
Could I ask a follow-up question right there?
Go for it.
Because we certainly ran into this, and even I noticed it at some point, and then you kind of elaborated on it with animators. That one specific asset that with the
oh, that's fine.
Is that okay?
That's absolutely okay. So yeah, to be clear, so what Alexander's referring to is, any animators listening will know this, that there's about 10 different rigs that are these kind of educational rigs that are open source and you can grab offline and use them in student work. That's fine because an animator isn't required to model a character or to rig a character necessarily unless it's something that they're offering as a service. So I'm looking at how they use that existing rig. That's absolutely fine. It's about the animation. It's about the motion. And the same is true actually of those tanks. If you make a demo where you're doing AI and you're using those stock tanks from Unity, that's absolutely fine. But you just have to make sure that you show to me that this is not stock work. It's very easy with animators because as long as that character is moving, I know you did some work. Whereas here, I need to see your work. So let me go through. So the character locomotion thing, no, it's not just animation. So what Mechanim is for those listening who don't use Unity, Mechanim is the system by which humanoid animation is processed in Unity. It's about blend trees. It's about how you move from, you make it so that they lean correctly as they run, how that blends directly into the idle, how you make it so that you can analog walk to run. That stuff's very cool. But that stuff is all visual. That stuff is all about that surface layer. Please don't write comments. I know that you can also use Mechanim to organize some scripting stuff. That's fine, but let's be honest, that's not how most people use it. That's fine. I just need to say it because otherwise there'll be someone. So no, what I'm more interested in is actually you making stuff that feels different, that plays differently. So with character locomotion, there's lots of examples of this. One that immediately comes to mind, someone who I immediately, went, well, that guy's clearly a cool coder and designer, is someone doing kind of almost like the Spider-Man 2 style web swinging, like trying to get that working. I think in this case, actually, it was made by the designer who did that for Spider-Man 2. So I think it was maybe less original, but very cool. Or a game where you climb walls, or a game where it's gravity switching, or a game where you can time travel, or a game where you can do whatever. Lots of different mechanics that are unique. That's a good way of demonstrating to me that you're not using a tutorial, because there is no tutorial on how to do a web slinging game. But if you make a really good feeling web slinging game, then I know you're very good at gameplay coding if you're able to do that. That's useful to me. That's a way of showcasing. Standing out is important. And what sucks for programmers is it's very hard to show in a portfolio like, I am a good programmer, because frankly, if the game's running at 60 FPS, well done. You did what you had to do. It's a well-made game. It doesn't matter what's going on under the hood. And definitely I can't see what's going under the hood, so I can't see how good a programmer you are. And also often the people, especially at the indie scale, who are judging you are not as good programmers as you either. You're a better programmer than me, probably. So you need to show me how skilled you are by confusing me, by surprising me, by showing something that I've not seen before, or showing me something that I didn't think an indie could do. So that's locomotion. That was the example I gave there. AI, similarly, show me AI that does clever stuff. I had a meeting with an AI programmer a little while ago that we were thinking about maybe working with. And he was talking to me about how he'd built squad AIs for a game. I won't reveal who it was by saying, but for a very well-known game, he'd done the AI programming on, and he was explaining to me how the squads in that game worked. And I had enough game design skill to understand what he meant and understand that was a good solution, but also I was impressed by the manner in which they did it and how they made that technically, run at a good frame rate. Not impact other systems in a way that was difficult, integrated well, and work well with content produced by other team members. So showcasing those skills, that's what a portfolio is. A portfolio is never about just making great work. It's always about showcasing a set of skills that are useful to the person employing you. Same is true of with animators. I had an animator apply to us recently who had a portfolio of absolutely incredible animal animation, but our next game's about bipeds, so utterly useless, unfortunately, and a problem.
And it was really good work.
It was really good work, but in this case, unfortunately, she was super experienced in stuff that wasn't relevant to what we were doing. That's a shame, but maybe we'll work with her again in the future. But it's about showcasing. What was the other thing I said? So character locomotion, AI was the one in the middle there. There was something else I suggested to this guy.
It was what would you consider to be challenging interaction worthy of a portfolio?
Oh, challenging interaction. So challenging interaction, again, what stands out? Immediately things that would impress me are, can you make a really good gravity gun? Can you make a really good sword fighting mechanic? Now, these are not things, these are design problems to some extent, how do you design that? But as a coder, I'm also going to expect you to get things done well, to be able to understand if something feels bad or feels good. A game designer is going to work with you in order to kind of corral that experience, but at the same time, I'm expecting you to be able to kind of fill in some gaps, and being able to showcase gameplay that's unique is cool. Gameplay program is a tough one. And it's a tough one if you're aiming at the indie space. It's very tough because, frankly, in the indie space, everyone's a gameplay programmer because everyone's kind of because that's basically where most of the work is. So basically everyone's jumping in and fiddling with it. Current side project we're doing, one of the artists is doing some gameplay coding on the project. It's everyone dives in on it because if you've got a skill in that area, you're doing it. If you want to work in a bigger team, then you are looking for opportunities to demonstrate that you can produce really polished, clean work. And there I'm a little bit out of my depth in terms of how to give advice on that, because obviously I don't produce very clean, polished code. So that would be a question for more of an expert. But yeah, so there you go. There's some extrapolation on, apologies for, Twitter, 140 characters, often can't go into as much detail as I'd like.
Hey there, curly bracket Mike and square bracket Alexander.
Nice. See, people getting creative with it. It's fun.
My question is not specifically games related, but I could use more input from hardworking men such as yourself. I recently
No one's ever described me as a hardworking man before. I like that.
Look at my hands.
He works. The calluses. You can really see how much he presses the WASD buttons on his keyboard.
My mouse carpal tunnel.
Exactly.
I recently finished my degree and had the opportunity to start working at either of two companies. One I worked for as a student for a while, the other one I did my thesis at. Since it is my first full-time job, I had no reference to know for sure what I might find most important in the workplace. I only had the things I knew from working from home as a student part-time. I don't want to bore you guys with details of my reasoning then, but I decided to go for the company I thought might be the, quote, safer option. As it turns out, I did not have my priorities correct, and now noticing that I think it might have made the wrong decision. The first months at the job are still probation, so I in theory could maybe still go for a position elsewhere fairly quickly if the possibility arises. But here's where my question comes in. Is it bad etiquette, bad looking on a resume, or otherwise a bad idea at principle to move so quickly and change a job? And as a short follow-up, how has your guys' day been? Love the podcast and the games. Keep it up. And I decided to just not use your name. Sorry, because I don't know if your bosses may be listening.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. It depends what decision the employee makes.
It has been fascinating to us. The breadth of folks that listen to this show. So to keep you as anonymized as possible, thank you again for the question. But I won't be using your name on the show.
So what they're up against here is, yes, there is a potential that on a CV, when you see, a list of jobs occupied, if a job is occupied for only a couple of months, there is a bias there. There is an assumption that, oh, what went wrong? And that will come up in interviews. That will be something that's discussed. I don't think, and Alexander can maybe have a different opinion on this, but I don't think that it doesn't get you in the room for the interview, but I think it's absolutely a question you need to have an answer to, and a very good answer to, that's not just, I was a bit bored. It has to be like, no, these are the problems I saw with the company I was at, and I felt that this opportunity, which I moved to immediately after, which you can see, felt like a better fit. But you need to be prepared for that question, I guess.
Yeah, there are numerous cultural things in play here. Given the way this is written, there's a couple indicators here that point out they're not an American. So I'm going to take a moment here, and apologies to all people who live in places with universal healthcare for 1 second. So I've actually come up against this one from folks in my past, not even just in my past, but very recently as well. Students who get out of school and they have the opportunity for a job at a major corporation for a while, or they can go and take a risk. And I certainly agree that in your younger years you should take a risk, because you absolutely have the ability to take that risk during that time. But that does not go at the detriment of your long-term well-being, whether that is financial or health-wise. Both of those things come into play specifically in the States. If you work at a corporation for a while, yes, you've got health insurance, so you're covered there, but you are also learning sort of the basics of a 401k or a 403b if you're in nonprofit, which is about retirement savings. And given the way things are, you cannot assume that things will be there for you when you retire. So learning those systems early is a good way to do it. You can, if everything seems to be going well and in your late 20s or your 30s, you're not really doing the family thing, don't really have like other folks that you have to support and don't have to be responsible and blah, 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 then sure, go ahead. Take bigger risks, because that's the way things are allowed. But yeah, in this, like, just speaking to this particular situation, I'm not going to shame this person for taking the safer option, from the start, because I think that is the more responsible option if you are in the States. Now, if you live in certain other countries where you don't have to worry about healthcare and maybe artists get 500 euros a month, then yeah, go bonkers. Like, certainly take the risk. I mean, that's in professional life, you have to balance risk constantly. And depending on what your situation is, you can take greater risks. So that's my one little thing in this one, is that, it doesn't seem like this, I don't think this person comes from from the States. So, you can move forward. Now, again, I can't speak to European, etiquette on this one, but in the States, usually the saying is about 2 years. If you're in a place about 2 years, you are absolutely free, to move on at that point. It is, especially, given the way things are, you should moving every 2 years, because there's massive financial reasons for doing this, because every single time you have a new opportunity, typically you will go up, another pay grade. You're increasing your pay, which means that if you are increasing that pay, especially early on, and you don't have other dependencies, you can put more of that money aside, which can pay for things in the future. So about 2 years is what? Do you know what's the rule in the UK? Like,
I think it's about 2 years again. I think most, and a lot of, it's worth noting as well, a lot of jobs in the UK in the games industry require a minimum of 3 years industry experience, which kind of reinforces that rule of kind of, if you are a recent graduate, spending 2 or 3 years at one job is a very good foundation. It's exactly what I did. I stayed at Blitz for, I think, 3.5 years, which is probably a bit too long, right? It's probably a bit too far. But yeah, I would say 2 years is 2 years. You don't get asked a question. 2 years, people just move on from jobs after 2 years. It's not a thing. I think under 2 years, as I said, be prepared for the question. I don't think if I see a CV and you're impressing me in every other area, but I notice that you're only at one job for 2 months, I'm going to get you in for the interview. I'm just going to have a note that I must ask you a question about that. Like, and I think that's just what you need to be prepared for. And as long as you have a good answer to that question, which is, yeah, it wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the first job I wanted. It wasn't something that worked for me. I think you're fine. Where it falls down is if you do a bad job of answering that question and I think you're lying, or I think that maybe they didn't like you or you were fired. But again, these things fade as well throughout your job. You know, I was, it's not on my CV because I was fired internally and moved to a different team, but I was fired within 2 months of my first job in the industry. And I did okay because, you know, yeah, if that comes up in conversation, you just explain, yeah, the boss didn't like me and I was horrible as well. I deserved it. And I swallowed my pride and went and learned how to be a better developer. But like, you know, it is something that you're just gonna have a little mark next to your name, and they're gonna ask you a question about it, and that's I think that's the worst case scenario that comes out of it. In terms of the actual taking the risk and moving, as I think Alexander gave a very good answer to that in terms of just it's all a risk. You're looking in the video games industry.
Oh yeah. I wasn't even talking about the video games industry aspect of it.
Yeah, it's all a risk, and depending on what kind of work you're doing as well. Actually, wait a minute. No, this isn't necessarily a video game industry question, is it? Because they said this is not video game, but you're smart chaps. I think it was there.
No, that's why I was saying, like,
so it's more general.
I was taking a more general approach. If we're talking specifically about the video games industry, like if you have a job that has any type of stability for 2 years, blessings upon you. Like,
yeah, I think that's getting better, and it's definitely better in the UK. I mean, America, the horror stories you hear about, like when AAA games finish and just basically everyone's looking for a job. I mean, that probably leads to better salaries, but definitely less stability, as you said. Like, it's all that shifting around. But anyway, so yeah, it's a more general question. But yeah, I think
actually roll that back. No, it is better salaries. I mean, it's hazard pay. Like, you're getting paid more because
absolutely
you're, you know, the taxes aren't the same. The oh my god, what's the word I'm looking for here? Benefits. The benefits aren't the same.
Sure.
There's a lot of things, and that's why, you know, it's certainly when we're having conversations between an American programmer and a UK programmer, the numbers are astronomically different.
For sure. And I know this is something, and also it's something I'm very cautious about when we're giving advice. It's something I've talked with Rami about because both of us obviously live in mega healthcare places, at least for the next couple of years. Mega kind of supportive countries that allow us to kind of be looked after. That safety net means our relationship with salary is very, very different than it is with Americans. So yeah. So hopefully that's useful advice. It's a bit more general than we usually do, but yeah, I think go for something interesting. If you're young, as Alexander says, this is probably the best chance you have to take a risk.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithellGames.com. That's contact@BithellGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging at Mike Bithell or at Selinsky. I was just thinking about what the YouTube comments of this show are going to be like after.
So interesting.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downin. We'll be back next week. Actually, I want to roll that back for a second. Regarding iTunes and stuff like that, like I know folks are shifting to other platforms where they might be getting this podcast from. Let us know, because you know, this is one of those classic situations where it's just like, oh Old man Slewinski doesn't know about Snapchat until about 4 years after it's not cool anymore. So yeah, if you're picking up your...
I like that voice went Canadian towards the end in a way that was really giant.
Old man Slewinski, eh?
You traveled about 700 miles over the course of that sentence. It's great.
Yeah, so let us know about that stuff. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downin. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word of Mike.
Sunshine.